On this episode of the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the New York State Fair as a living document of the 19th century. Don't go away. Want to bring history to life in your classroom? With Everything as a Primary Source to go, you can borrow real historical artifacts from the last 200 years, shipped right to your school. It's hands-on history, paired with ready-to-use lesson plans and classroom activities that make the past come to life for you and your students. Whether you're teaching the Industrial Revolution all the way up through the Communication Revolution, there's something in our collection for every era. Visit everything-history.com/EPS to go and start transforming your teaching today. That's everything-history.com/EPS to go, because history belongs in your hands. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us, and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. So I'm here with Jason, and we're at the Mid-Hudson Council for the Social Studies Conference in Slate Hill, New York, and you are a curriculum advisor, you are a teacher, and
Yes.
You work for the
Office of Children and Family Services.
Here, and that encapsulates the entire state of New York.
Correct. And they oversee 9 facilities where we're responsible to educate those young men who are adjudicated by the courts.
And so it's a population that comes from all over the state and might not share in a lot of things necessarily, but they do. And they'll realize it at some point or another, right? And so upstate New York, New York State, for people who are not familiar with it, it just kind of gets generalized into one big thing, but it's pretty...
Very much so. It's very diverse. And this working within these facilities, working with students from all around the state, you see the pride that comes out of each one of these cities, these regions. And then also the idea that it always doesn't bring people together. The size of New York State and how much it covers everywhere from Buffalo down to New York City, there's not too much commonality between Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, all the way down to the city, but yet I have found different times when students really talk about what they know, their neighborhoods, something they're proud about. It really kind of breaks down those barriers in these facilities, because sometimes there is safety concerns in the facilities. Is that when you lock up students that don't know each other, there could be possibility where I don't know you, I don't like you. So the idea of using history and education to bring students together, it's just talking about commonalities, talk about where you came from, what makes you proud.
Especially with a lot of the upstate cities. Again, a lot of people outside of the state of New York, when they think of New York and cities, they think of New York City.
Correct.
And it's like, as you just mentioned, there's several across the thruway, from Albany to Buffalo, Rochester, Utica, Syracuse, the list goes on, and then up and down I-87, Hudson Valley area, even more, that they're considerable cities. They have their own respective cultures, and even within them, they are diverse culturally, different neighborhoods, different histories, and things like that. And it's those slight differences, because you can go to Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo. They all, from a distance, it's like the same skyline, basically. It's all the same, because they all were built around the same time period. It's in that western central New York area also that they have the New York State Fair. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about right now, and what that maybe represents, or maybe factors into a certain extent, why there's these similarities and differences acting at the same time, that once you break past those boundaries, you realize how much more people have in common with each other. So I just kind of rambled for a little bit, but I think essentially the New York State Fair Syracuse, it's a Syracuse thing.
Yes.
How many times have you been?
I've never been there,
You've
sir.
never been.
Never
See?
been there, exactly. And it really just me working within these juvenile centers, the diversity of my students and getting to know the walk of life of all my students throughout the state. But then just the idea that this young man who was from Syracuse, this young man, he was so shocked that everyone else in the class, myself, Hudson Valley resident, and a lot of New York City students, a lot of Long Island students, didn't even know there was a state fair. Mm-hmm. But this teachable moment for this young man who's pretty deficient, who didn't really, was not successful in the public school, but yet his ability to understand what to do at the state fair, where to go at the state fair, he saw the state fair as his annual holiday. Understand my students, some of them don't have the best lives, the best upbringing, has those socioeconomic limitations. Mm-hmm. So he really saw the state fair as a place for him to enjoy himself and kind of as an escape. But yet, the teachable moment here was this young man talking about his neighborhood, his city of Syracuse, and his love of it. It really broke down a lot of barriers inside that classroom when he just talked about what he knew, the state fair. And that's just really it decreased safety issues within the facility, that now it humanized that student a little bit more. What is the state fair? Now you have this one student telling the other student about this big thing that happens in Syracuse once a year. And a lot of my New York City students were blown away that this even happens.
Yeah. I feel like I've been to the fair a few times. When I just matched it up, make sure I knew the time period that it came about, it makes sense. It does have a very late 19th century feel to it.
Okay.
As it turns out, I guess the very first time they held the fair there was 1841. And then it became permanent part of Syracuse in 1890. It is a very turn-of-the-century look to it. They have the big halls. There's the dairy hall. There's the butter statues are there. I remember enjoying just having one cup after another of milk for like a quarter.
Fresh milk, yes.
And the fresh milk is so good. But it's. I'm curious if, so the question who's the intended audience? By calling it the New York State Fair, one would think, again, outsider looking in, that it's for the entire state of New York. But I didn't actually go there or even know about it until I lived in that area, until I lived in central New York for a couple of years. And you don't get a lot of representation like you would, from down here, from even up north. It's very much a Syracuse identity thing.
And you could see from my Syracuse student how proud he was of it.
Right.
This is a Syracuse thing, and even much so the empowerment that no one knows about this. So now he was the content expert talking about what he does in Syracuse, and it really seemed like he did this every year in Syracuse. We're talking about a 16-year-old young man and growing up in Syracuse, and every year that's what he did with his family.
I feel like it may have kind of come as a result of New York fashioning itself and calling itself the Empire State.
Okay.
And giving each section of the state its own identity. Right? Like
sure.
Each place, like Buffalo is known because of Niagara Falls, is so close by. Rochester has its, Kodak, and then its history with Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass.
Sure,
and you move across. Albany, of course, is the capital. And that's what I expected to see the first time I went to New York State Fair, was sort of like when you go to the Capitol, not the Capitol building itself, but some of the buildings down there has all the names of the counties, around the buildings, and you get that sense of like, this is the hub. I mean, Syracuse is a lot more central to central New York, the rest of the state, but the New York State Fair is a Syracuse thing, So I'm wondering if that was some of the was there ever an intention to make it, an all-call across New York from Messina all the way down to Tioga County? People are like, oh, got to go to the fair.
Yeah.
Or if it was just like, this is our thing. If you come to it and you happen to be from Glens Falls, great, but it's a Syracuse thing.
Yeah, let it be known, Syracuse, but it's like a New York theme, but it's definitely a Syracuse. And once again, I've never been there. I never did it. I'm living it through one of my students who, kind of growing up doing it. And then it turned into him creating memories and stories, which turned out to be a PowerPoint presentation. But yet he's citing things, which I would love to see him going back, a photo of that memory, the photo of that building, and then really having him understand what that building was used for at that state fair. Like you just said, why was that? There's a theme, of industrialization, early 1900s. And having him really starting to own, this is the purpose of this state fair, and why is it there from the governor's point of view, from the people's point of view, and people from even why is the state fair happening down in the Hudson Valley, from those people's point of view. It was just very, I just see this ability for our students really to start diving deep into historical analysis on something that they wouldn't even think about studying in history class.
Right.
And it's just very empowering.
And it would fit the bill for pretty much every section of the state. You'd think with a thing like the state fair, kind of like a World's Fair, how it changed locations when they did World's Fairs still.
Sure.
And the United States had its share of them. The Columbian exhibition in Chicago. There was the St. Louis Fair to celebrate the Louisiana Purchase in the centennial of that. You had the many World's Fairs, including a couple times in Queens.
Yes. Yep.
And they have become. The World's Fair, that was a Robert Moses thing. It really created, like Shea Stadium came from that, right? And you have, the statues and everything that are very recognizable. If you just watch the opening credits of King of Queens, you see or Men in Black or something. And so it's like, one would think that the New York State Fair, because it's the Empire State, wouldn't it make sense that it would be held in a different location,
move around the state,
throughout the state,
and showcase the regionality, the special, the locality,
and get people that wouldn't normally otherwise go there to get a chance to see it? Because those World's Fairs, one of the purpose of, they weren't really agricultural fairs like this one, but those World's Fairs, the idea was that countries from around the world, and of course the host country, would have an opportunity to show off what they do best. And you get a sense of that. You get a little bit of that at the state fair. But again, it's like, here is what all the corners of the state do to show Syracuse, right? Like Syracuse is the judge of all of this stuff, and not, I'm from, Malone, and, because Malone has its own. They have the Franklin County Fair, because the county fair.
Yes, we have the county fairs, yep. And me coming from Columbia County Dutchess, right on the border there, obviously the Dutchess County Fair is a very big thing in the Hudson Valley. It seems like it's like the showcase of the Hudson Valley. Rhinebeck, New York, very affluent place. People come to showcase like the best and the brightest of Dutchess County. And we would like to see that at the state fair too. But just going back to my students, just the idea of having them really study what they know. And I think this is where the primary sources are everywhere really comes into play with our reluctant students within juvenile justice, trying to build up their skills, how to play historian. Cracking the textbook is not going to happen. And it's just, they will go through the motions, read some comprehension questions, answer the questions, pass the regents. But as a history teacher, we want our students to own their community, understand their community. And I think just that teachable moment where one of my very reluctant students started becoming successful in the classroom setting because he taught others of what he already knew. And then from that, he found out that he was playing historian. Right? Where did the state fair come from? What do you do at the state fair? Almost like a public liaison for Syracuse.
It's good, yeah.
And I think that just seeing that moment and just letting him develop it, not saying, okay, you're from Syracuse, oh, I know the state fair, oh, you went to state fair, all right, we gotta go talk about the Constitution now, right? This is U.S. history class, Constitution. No, let him develop it, and then from that teachable moment, our reluctant learners are more willing to maybe crack the textbook, get ready for the regents, and actually be productive and get back into the community so they can, be helpful and not a hinder to their community.
Yeah. When I say like bottom-up approach, it's not because somebody's lower on the socioeconomic standards, but I think that approach, another way of putting it is place-based, right? Place-based history, where it's what you know and what you share. It gives the opportunity to kind of match it up with the top-down way. So the top-down way is like, okay, well, we got to stop what we're doing. We're talking U.S. Constitution now. You can see where the Constitution is present in things like an agricultural fair. You know, Article 1, Section 8 is all about the economy. I mean, Syracuse wouldn't exist without the Erie Canal.
Sure.
The Erie Canal became a New York project because the Congress didn't want any part of it. They was like, too expensive, too much. And so Governor DeWitt Clinton said, let's do it ourselves. It'll become a New York thing. And so it all starts there. And throughout that whole era of them dredging, making this huge canal, they're, consistently and constantly kind of like reacting and responding to things going on nationally, and then when they're done, it really influences the growth of the rest of the country, because it makes New York City the seaport for all the way into the Great Lakes. Like, that's your access way to the interior of the country. And so you can follow that same kind of culture to this day flowing through. That would be a great activity for the students to do, is be like, the Erie Canal and me. Like, yes. Why am I here? Because of that thing.
No, that's a great point, because my students come from all around the state, and the unifying factor is the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal, to the Mohawk, to the Hudson, it does unify the state. And then once again, there's a theme of unity. My students come from many walks of life and all around New York State. And building rapport inside the classroom is very key because of all the barriers between them. And I think that's one approach. But hey, there's this thing called the Erie Canal. As a history teacher, you got to know what the Erie Canal is as we teach that, but it's really about community building and getting my wonderful students to play nice and work together and build teamwork. Kind of like build relationships instead of battleships type stuff.
My first exposure to the Erie Canal, I have like a lifelong obsession with it, and it all started in 4th grade. So I grew up in an Air Force family, and so we moved a lot, not as much as some kids I knew, but we moved from New Hampshire to New York, not a great distance, but when I arrived in New York, it was New York State history. So I had no connection to the state anywhere I was. But I remember we had the New York State poet laureate or something came to our school. It wasn't really the best place for him because, like me, most of my classmates were from the Air Force Base. They were representing all parts of the country.
Oh, wow.
They weren't from New York. But I remember him singing the song about a mule named Sal, bridge coming, everyone down, going down the Erie Canal. And I was like, that sounds great. And I remember reading about the Erie Canal and how incredible it was. When I finally saw it, when I was an adult, and I was in college.
You were a little disappointed?
No, I just couldn't believe it. I was
just thinking about how small it is.
I was like, oh, that's it. But I was like, there's the canal. And my wife is from a canal town. She's from one of the towns. So it was part of her life ever since she was born. So she was like, oh, yeah, there's the canal. But I was losing my mind because I just thought it was so cool.
Yes.
And it's the same kind of thing that we're talking about. Like, that was maybe not the best person to come to a school from, representing kids from, I had friends from Arkansas and Texas and all over the country, kids from all over the world. Because the Air Force, they would be in places like one of my friends grew up in England, an English accent, and so then they plop him in, okay, here's this guy with a guitar, and he's going to start singing about New York State. And we didn't really have that connection because we weren't from here. Had they given us an opportunity to maybe talk about where we were from and present it like what we're talking about, that's when you get the magic happening. It's like the kids become experts.
And that's key so much for my population of students is they have not been successful inside that classroom. So finding ways that they can artificially be successful in that classroom where the teacher sets the scene for them to do things to build confidence, to feel what it likes to get praised by a teacher.
Yeah.
Instead of get kicked out of the classroom, now you're getting praised for something you already know. Teacher didn't ask you to do something you didn't know. You know this. And a skilled teacher can actually build upon what they know to the curriculum that they have to know to graduate high school, pass the Regents, and all that good stuff.
So having students create public history, which is what we're talking about, is a great way to do all those things. And I'll just say this. I hope this isn't the last time we talk.
No, I really appreciate this. Thank you.
popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything is a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.